In this episode, we move into a skill that separates passive monitoring from real analytical thinking, because pattern recognition and command analysis help security professionals understand not just that something happened, but what kind of story that activity is telling. For a brand new learner, this matters because attackers rarely begin by announcing themselves clearly through one obvious alert that explains everything. More often, they leave behind clues and sequences of actions, repeated behaviors, strange command usage, and technical choices that only become meaningful when someone learns to recognize the pattern. Pattern recognition is the habit of noticing that individual events are related in a way that suggests a larger purpose. Command analysis is the habit of examining the instructions, scripts, and process behavior used on a system to determine whether they fit ordinary administration, legitimate application activity, or something much more suspicious. Once those two skills start working together, cybersecurity becomes much less about isolated alerts and much more about understanding intent through behavior. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. At the most basic level, a pattern is a repeated or recognizable arrangement of events, and security analysts care about patterns because malicious activity is often too subtle to judge from one event alone. A single login, one process launch, or one outbound connection might be harmless in isolation. The same events, arranged in a particular order or repeated in a certain rhythm, may reveal persistence, lateral movement, internal discovery, or preparation for data theft. Pattern recognition allows the analyst to step back from the noise of individual logs and ask whether the overall shape of activity looks familiar, abnormal, or functionally suspicious. This is especially important in environments where thousands or millions of events occur every day and only a small fraction carry real danger. For beginners, the major lesson is that analysts are not simply collecting technical trivia. They are learning to notice relationships between events so that a cluster of weak signals can become a strong reason to investigate. Command analysis fits naturally into this picture because commands often reveal what a user, administrator, application, or attacker is trying to do next. A command is an instruction given to a system, whether directly by a person, indirectly through a script, or automatically by a process. When analysts examine commands, they are not only looking at the words or parameters themselves. They are asking who issued the command, on what host, under what account, at what time, from what parent process, and in what broader context. A command that is perfectly normal in a maintenance window on an administrative server may be highly suspicious on a receptionist's laptop late at night. That means command analysis is not mainly about memorizing lists of bad instructions. It is about understanding purpose and fit. For a new learner, that is helpful because it keeps the focus on reasoning. The key question is whether the command behavior matches legitimate business activity or suggests a sequence of actions serving some other goal. One reason pattern recognition matters so much is that attackers often rely on sequences rather than isolated dramatic actions. A compromise may begin with a phishing message, then move to a document opening, then a script launch, then a new scheduled task, then a connection to an unusual destination. None of those steps is equally suspicious in every situation, and some may even look fairly ordinary by themselves. What makes them meaningful is the order, timing, and relationship between them. A single process launch might not matter. A process launch that follows a suspicious attachment and is followed by outbound communication becomes far more interesting. This is why analysts often think in terms of chains rather than moments. For beginners, the value of that mindset is huge. It teaches that security events rarely appear as complete stories all at once. They emerge through sequences, and pattern recognition is the skill that helps someone notice that the separate pieces are actually part of one connected narrative. A useful starting point for command analysis is understanding what ordinary command behavior looks like in an environment. Administrators use commands for maintenance, troubleshooting, automation, and deployment. Applications use commands or command-like execution behavior as part of installation, updates, background tasks, and normal processing. Security teams themselves may use administrative tools heavily during response. If a beginner assumes every command is suspicious, the result will be confusion and alert fatigue. Good analysis depends on knowing what kinds of systems normally run commands, who is expected to issue them, and which behaviors make sense for the host involved. A server that runs regular scripted tasks will look very different from an employee workstation that is mainly used for email and business applications. Baselines matter here just as they do elsewhere in security. The analyst becomes effective not by fearing every command, but by recognizing when command usage on a particular system no longer fits the system's normal role, timing, or ownership. One especially important aspect of command analysis is parent-child process relationships, because commands rarely appear out of nowhere. Something usually launches them. If a standard management tool launches a command interpreter during a routine automation process, that may be expected. If a document viewer launches the same interpreter immediately after a user opens an attachment, that is much more suspicious. The surrounding process chain often reveals far more than the command text alone, because it shows how the activity started and what it was connected to. Analysts therefore pay close attention to which process created another, what arguments were passed, and whether the sequence fits a believable workflow. For a beginner, this is a major lesson in how context changes meaning. The same command can appear harmless or highly suspicious depending on the parent process, the user account, and the events that came immediately before it. Pattern recognition becomes stronger when commands are interpreted as part of execution chains rather than as isolated lines in a log. Arguments and parameters also matter because they often show the command's specific purpose. A command interpreter may be routine, but what it is being asked to do can make all the difference. Analysts examine whether the command is reaching external destinations, creating new tasks, changing security settings, querying user accounts, compressing files, launching encoded content, or calling system components that ordinary users never need to touch directly. The important point for beginners is not to memorize endless syntax. It is to understand that commands can reveal intent more clearly through their options and targets than through the command name itself. Attackers often use familiar tools because familiar tools attract less attention, but they drive those tools toward uncommon goals. A command may not look suspicious until you notice that it is targeting unusual files, creating persistence, or chaining several operations together in a way that fits post-compromise behavior. That is where command analysis turns surface familiarity into deeper understanding. Pattern recognition also helps analysts spot regularity where humans would normally behave with more variation. Automated malicious activity often repeats in predictable ways. The same command may run on a schedule, the same lookup may occur every few minutes, or the same sequence of administrative actions may appear across multiple hosts in rapid succession. Those rhythms can be valuable because they suggest coordination, automation, or malware activity rather than ordinary user behavior. Humans tend to vary in timing and make small differences in how they interact with systems. Automated activity often reveals itself through steadier repetition or broader scale. For a brand new learner, this is a powerful clue to remember. A repeated action is not automatically malicious, because legitimate tasks are also automated, but repetition becomes more meaningful when it appears on the wrong kind of host, under the wrong account, or in a sequence tied to other suspicious events. Pattern recognition is often about noticing not just what happened, but how consistently and systematically it happened. Another critical part of command analysis is recognizing when trusted tools are being used for untrusted purposes. Attackers often prefer to work with tools already present in the environment because this helps them blend in and reduces the need to introduce obviously malicious files. They may rely on scripting engines, administrative utilities, remote management tools, archiving features, or built-in account and network utilities that have perfectly legitimate uses in normal operations. What makes the activity suspicious is not necessarily the existence of the tool. It is the way the tool is being used, the sequence around it, and the mismatch between the action and the system's purpose. For beginners, this is one of the most important mindset shifts in modern detection. Security problems do not always come from foreign-looking software. Sometimes they come from familiar tools arranged into unfamiliar behavior. Command analysis helps uncover that misuse by showing when ordinary components are serving a clearly non-ordinary objective. Obfuscation makes this topic more challenging because attackers often try to hide the meaning of commands so that both people and simple detections have a harder time understanding what is happening. A command may be broken into fragments, encoded, nested inside another process, or constructed in a way that delays interpretation. This does not mean every complex command is malicious, because administrators and developers sometimes use complicated instructions for legitimate reasons. Still, unnecessary concealment is always worth asking about. If a system used mainly for everyday office work begins running commands that are heavily obscured, the question becomes why such concealment is needed there at all. For a new learner, this is a useful principle. Complexity by itself is not the problem. Unexplained complexity in the wrong context is the problem. Pattern recognition helps here too, because obfuscation often appears alongside other suspicious signs such as unusual parent processes, network callbacks, persistence changes, or administrative queries that make the hidden command more revealing once the full chain is considered. Command analysis is also powerful during investigations because commands often mark the transition from access to action. An attacker may gain entry through phishing, stolen credentials, or a vulnerable service, but commands often show what they decided to do once inside. They may enumerate accounts, inspect shares, query system information, create scheduled tasks, alter settings, move files, or prepare communication with other systems. Analysts can therefore use command history, process records, and related telemetry to reconstruct the progression of the compromise. For beginners, this is an important point because investigation is not only about confirming that a system was touched. It is about understanding what the adversary tried to accomplish, how far they progressed, and which other systems or accounts may now be at risk. Commands provide evidence of intention in a way that simple connection records sometimes cannot. They show the actions taken on the host and help explain whether the event reflects reconnaissance, persistence, escalation, data collection, or preparation for something worse. Of course, one of the hardest parts of pattern recognition and command analysis is avoiding false confidence. Not every suspicious-looking pattern is malicious, and not every odd command means an attacker is present. Software updates, administrator troubleshooting, custom automation, and emergency maintenance can all create activity that looks unusual at first glance. That is why mature analysts combine command evidence with user role, change records, host purpose, timing, and surrounding events before reaching conclusions. A strange command on a development server during a planned deployment may be entirely acceptable. The same command on a finance workstation at 2 in the morning may deserve immediate escalation. For beginners, this is where discipline matters most. Security analysis is strongest when curiosity is paired with restraint. The goal is not to assume the worst from every irregularity. The goal is to understand whether the irregularity fits a legitimate explanation or whether the larger pattern continues to point toward malicious intent. In a Security Operations Center, SOC, these skills become especially valuable because analysts often face alerts that are incomplete, noisy, or ambiguous. Pattern recognition helps them decide whether a cluster of events deserves attention even when no single alert seems decisive. Command analysis helps them understand what the affected host or account was actually trying to do. Together, these skills support triage, escalation, and communication. An analyst may explain that a workstation did not merely run one unusual process. It opened a document, launched an unexpected command interpreter, created a persistence mechanism, and then contacted a rare external destination. That kind of explanation is much more useful than repeating raw alert text. For a beginner, this shows why these skills matter beyond technical curiosity. They help transform scattered telemetry into clear reasoning that other defenders, incident responders, and leaders can act on. When the story is clear, containment and investigation both move faster and with better judgment. A practical example can bring the ideas together. Imagine an employee opens an attachment that appears related to a current project. Soon afterward, the host shows a document viewer launching a command interpreter. That interpreter runs an unusually encoded instruction. A new scheduled task is created, and then the system begins making repeated outbound connections at predictable intervals. No single element guarantees malicious activity on its own. Documents open all the time, command interpreters exist for legitimate reasons, and scheduled tasks are common on many systems. But the pattern is what changes everything. The sequence, timing, parent-child process relationship, level of concealment, and repeated outbound behavior combine into a story that strongly suggests compromise, persistence, and likely command communication. For a new learner, this illustrates the central value of the topic. Pattern recognition sees the chain. Command analysis explains the chain. Together, they turn a confusing series of technical events into a plausible account of malicious behavior. As you bring all of this together, the lasting takeaway is that pattern recognition and command analysis are really about learning to see intention through behavior. Pattern recognition helps analysts notice when separate events belong to the same meaningful sequence, while command analysis helps them understand what the system was instructed to do and whether those instructions fit legitimate use. These skills matter because attackers often rely on familiar tools, partial steps, and quiet sequences rather than obvious attacks that explain themselves immediately. For someone studying CySA+, the big lesson is that strong detection does not depend only on knowing fixed bad indicators. It also depends on reading relationships, process chains, repetition, concealment, and context closely enough to recognize when ordinary components are being arranged for extraordinary harm. When you can see both the pattern and the purpose, you move much closer to the heart of real security analysis, where the challenge is not merely spotting activity, but understanding what that activity is trying to become.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.